Good morning from San Cugat. I'm feeling like a completionist, so I am going to walk you through some of the nonfiction side of our family library. For anybody who is trying to figure out what they want to do, how to support their English language learners at home, I would say it's actually pretty important that you make sure your kids have some nonfiction in the mix too. Maybe in particular because I'm an autistic mom and one of my kids is on the spectrum. But I sincerely believe that happy animal stories can only take you so far, and have been working for over a decade to make sure there are some other things on the shelf for curious minds. Um, there's quite a bit of architecture in our collection, in particular because my aunt started us off on David Macaulay's collection. Cathedral, I think Castle is probably the one we love best. But Castle, Cathedral, Mosque, Pyramid, Mill, City, Unbuilding, and Underground are excellent books, in my opinion, and worth having in your home library. You can see we've got Gaudi, and this is a gift from my husband, a European menu reader. It'll serve in a lot of places. This one is one that I like, but that it was not quite what I expected to be. World Architecture, the Masterworks. It emphasizes architecture from places I haven't been and was interesting in that respect. And it's less of a kind of overview of what you would expect from the ones Macaulay covers, more of Asian architecture, which I appreciated. Might be a little above the level still of what the kids are interested in or would read at depth. And I absolutely bought it for them younger than it was appropriate. This is about Pujikata Falls. I'm saying that wrong probably, but one of the Catalan architectures who, along with Gaudi, is celebrated here. And it's just kept from a visit somewhere. A visual encyclopedia, the arts. I'm not much of an art teacher. I'd like to be a better one. Some drawing books. This was actually building in architectural forms, draw like an artist kinds of books. This I brought back from Prague, but it has line drawings. It almost looks more like clip art, but if someone were studying kind of how to get it. Drawing faces, learning to draw cool stuff. You can actually make pretty good use of what your public libraries have in Spanish, Catalan, or other languages for drawing, if they're the kind that are designed for kids to kind of have a step-by-step sense of how to do it. The art book, in general, I really like DK Publishing. I'm not sure art is their strongest subject, but I sort of got attached to the idea of kids having a pretty thorough collection. This music book, it has tiny print, and it's a definitive visual history. Nobody ever really got into it. Books might not be the right way to teach music, but it's a resource. This was a photo guide from a trip we took to Empúries, which was a site on the Iberian Peninsula where both the Greeks and Romans lived. Making comics, I love Scott McCloud. You can see my kids have been a little rough on this one. But it's, I think, a pretty empowering way to teach about drawing. Our science books are well loved enough to have duct tape on their covers. This is Science Year by Year. It talks about discoveries. The Rock and Gem book gets a lot of traffic. Another duct tape science book, Science Encyclopedia from National Geographic. Some of these have been pushed to the back. We've got Everything Rocks and Minerals, another National Geographic title. Children's Dinosaur Atlas. I almost missed a flight because I was arbitrating who got to put stickers where in this one once. It was like I was within 10 minutes of missing a flight. But fortunately, that did not happen. We were there early and I was hyper-focused on dinosaurs. History Year by Year. It's another DK publication that I like. This is one that my sister gave us. It's Not the Stork, and a book about girls, boys, babies, bodies, families, and friends. This is maybe one that doesn't go as far as more modern publications do about talking about gender identity, people who are trans, but it talks about different kinds of families and is I think, a pretty decent place to start. I'm glad to have it. The Human Body is a Smithsonian choice. Celebrate Your Body, the ultimate puberty book for girls. This came free to us from a swap box, and I asked the boys, well, do you want to know what they tell the girls? And they said yes, so I read that. I should probably make sure to get something equivalent for the boys. They're getting that education in different ways in their other languages. So we'll walk again through DK. The biology book, the math book, the physics book, the astronomy book. I'm not sure how much time they've really selected these, but they do look through it, and it's sort of, I don't know, if you're like me and you have a liberal arts education and you have perhaps memory of about a paragraph on any given science topic because it wasn't your deep interest, that's the kind of thing that works. This is Constellations of the Night Sky, and it is kind of part explainer, part coloring book, potentially. I asked them not to color it. Unfortunately, I sent it to school with them when it was time for it, and it came back in, let's say, imperfect condition. But that came from Cosmocaixa, which is the big science museum in Barcelona. This one's from my mom, A Child's Introduction to the Night Sky. This is in the wrong place. It's a cookbook about pinchos, about hors d'oeuvres and things. I'm going to put that away somewhere else. Mythology. It's a DK Eyewitness book. It's not organized the way I probably would organize it if I were sort of thinking about the classics as my standpoint of a beginning place for Greek and Latin or Greek and Roman mythology, but it might be better for not starting there. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. How Technology Works. Kids like this one a lot. It's another DK publication. Very factoid based. Minecraft. Minecraft and the Minecraft Blockopedia are of interest if you want your kids reading. It's as good as anything. To some order of thinking. Economics, also well loved but not well treated. DK Economics book, politics book, feminism book, sociology, religions. It's nice to have religions plural instead of religion singular like they teach it at their school where it just means Catholicism. World War II book. We're going to need that one this weekend to talk about Nazism and write a paper for school. This is a souvenir from Berlin. A little history of the world. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't think it's a very good explainer for children, but I think it's a good book. Explorers from my brother. Another DK one. Amazing Tales of the World's Greatest Adventurers. I have feelings about colonialism and the way we tell these stories sometimes, but it's another way to look at geography. These are the United States of America State by State Guide. This is, I think, quite beautiful. Turning my camera isn't going to help me. I should do this. And it has the kind of factoids that I think Americans learn about their state, of what's your tree and what's your state bird and who's famous in your state. Visual history of this one's DK Smithsonian, American history. This is maybe doesn't belong here. Sailing handbook, Words That Built a Nation. This was a used bookstore find on the island where I'm from. It's from Scholastic, and there's probably some critique to do about it, but in terms of what you will have in the outside the U.S., I thought it worth bringing with us. It has the documents. from early American history. This is timelines from Black history, and I find it a little bit uneven too. Not that I'm an expert, but there are some important people missing, important enough I've heard of them, even though I had the world's widest education. And there are some popular culture people who I think, you are talented, but why are you here instead of the people I consider important? But anyway, better than nothing. Supplement to American history books that tend to be overly European or overly white. This came from London, from a used bookstore, Kings and Queens. History of Britain, DK, I'm pretty sure I bought that one online. Birds of the British Isles in Europe. That was a good used bookstore find. That's a hardcover from Romford, England. Beginning Bird Watchers book with stickers. We weren't the right age when we started this, but I should come back to it. This one, well loved, nearly destroyed. Cars, trains, ships, and planes. Doesn't even have a cover anymore, but I should either replace it or throw it away, but I just kind of think you've probably had enough time with that one, but if you ever asked me for it, I'd be mad that I couldn't find you a picture of whatever you're asking about. This is really mine. John Seymour, Complete Guidebook to Self-Sufficiency. But I need a Mediterranean version of it, because this kind of presumes a moderately wetter climate. I can't talk this morning. A moderately wetter climate. And it's still pretty great. A little bit of poetry that I feel like most American kids read. Shel Silverstein, Light in the Attic, Where the Sidewalk Ends. I know I found him delightful as a child. I don't love him as much as a parent, and maybe that's a me problem. But I get less excited about sort of the edgy, cheeky, slightly rude content for kids. This is a Victory cookbook, nostalgic cooking and facts from the UK from the 1940 through 54. There's not a thing in there that I would like to eat, but it's an interesting telling of the history of that period. This is a book on Catalan cuisine that I was given by a dear friend, Bonnie, and brought from the US, which is funny, but it's in English. And it says lots of good things about Catalan cuisine, but the author also kind of jokes at the beginning that is also quite salty, brown, and fried. This is Secrets of Feeding a Healthy Family. Again, I would not buy it for the recipes, and there are no secrets particularly, but Ellen Satter is an author who explains the concept of a division of responsibility, where adults offer nutritious and reasonable food to kids, and at predictable times of day, and kids decide whether to eat it or not, how much of it to eat or not. And I think I've already talked about how I tried this approach, and I wouldn't say it really entirely worked with me. For us, with a avoidant restrictive eater and with different cultural values, and the fact that at a base level, my husband and I we're not hungry at the same times of the day. But there are some good things in it about not being a snob, and not feeling like you should only offer your children the very, very best things you hope they eat as an adult. If you have a child who might get more protein in, if you would let them have a chicken tender or a fish stick. This is a very cool book that my Aunt Nancy printed for me that has the newspaper writing of someone in my family tree who came to attend the Chicago World Fair, and always plenty of dictionaries kicking around. This is called The Churriguera in Catalan, after the author's name, and you have to make sure you've got one that's up to date, or you could study real hard at the wrong things. But this is sort of like the 501 conjugated verbs that is more familiar to Americans, but it's done this way, teeny tiny, and also has some expressions in it. Can't remember if I've told you already, one of the hardest expressions to translate when you hear Catalan say, "Duni do." Every Catalan I've ever asked said, I can't really explain what that means. But my kids say it means sheesh. So Whatever you think sheesh is your reaction to, you could say dunido instead. These I brought with me. They're, other than like board books that I brought when I was pregnant with the kids, probably some of the only books that were my collection. I love Anne McCaffrey. And I actually read these during the pandemic. I read them aloud to my kids. I had a list of what order, and I thought that I didn't necessarily read them in her publication order or what is considered chronological order, but I started with Meneley's stories, the Harper Hall books, which are, I think, sort of the youngest introduction to her series, although they were written somewhere in the middle. And the kids liked them, and we went on through them, so then we kind of went back in time. Don't trust my order. I had it written down the way I like it best, and I don't know what the kids did with that piece of paper. I hope it's on my computer somewhere. Tucked behind are her son's novels, which I do not like nearly as much. And I've written about that on Goodreads if you want to hear me be mad at Todd McCaffrey for letting his feminist mother down. And a bunch of kind of, teachers sometimes just call it realia. Behind that Budapest book, there's a bunch of stuff that came back with us from trips that's, maps and brochures and bits of things to remember trips we've taken. And then the shelf below here is kind of a mishmash of things that I have picked up for free or that I have purchased. I am not really an Al-Anon family practice person anymore, but I was for a while, so I still have courage to change. My mom gave us this book, Brain Rules, gave it to my husband, actually. It was one of those ironic gifts because it talks about the importance of sleep and exercise, and it was given to him right before his twins were born. And guess what you don't get when you give birth to twins and raise them with somebody is, you don't particularly get sleep or exercise. I think she meant to give him a children's, like, how the baby brain develops book. This is definitely the wrong book. I would get rid of it, but it's not mine, it's his. How to Talk to Anyone was a book swap book. Talking to Strangers, Malcolm Gladwell. I haven't read, but I think it was quite sweet. My child who's on the spectrum said, that I'm interested in that. So I said, of course. And it probably wasn't what he expected. This is one of those books that I would like to write my own version of. Too loud, too bright, too fast, too tight. What to do if you are sensory defensive in an overstimulating world. It's one of those books that starts from really a particular person's point of view and then also is kind of expanded to try to be a more scholarly take on what starts as a pretty personal take. And as happens with these books sometimes, the advice can be about something that really was effective for the person who wrote it that may not be at all a match for the kind of autism you have. So this might be the wrong one, but what comes to mind is like Reiki massage as being was something that was really valued by this author that worked for them. But if you're the kind of autistic person who would rather not be touched by strangers, you're probably not looking for a masseuse. But anyway, I definitely related to a lot of this. I may even have started highlighting it in the point where I was at a part of my journey where I was thinking like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is me. This is I think, terrible title, but it's the second book by an author who wrote The Out of Sync Child. And so then it's The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. And I think that is a potentially stigmatizing label, but I think it's a way of avoiding the other labels, which change all the time and maybe is intended to sound less stigmatizing. It's activities for kids with sensory integration dysfunction. And what I like about it is that in essence, it kind of, you could use it like a guide to do your own home occupational therapy instead of paying a ton of money to somebody else to do it. And it, I feel, is sufficiently scientifically backed that they're safe, good strategies. And they're things you maybe wouldn't even think of. And at one point, because my kids are 10, my child to whom this is most relevant, and in my opinion, that's my ADHD diagnosed child, was reading it to himself. And I happen to have also highlighted in this book, so perhaps called his attention to the ones that I thought most appropriate for inside our house, because some things that are appropriate outside your house are not appropriate inside your house. But things like, I don't know, like you roll up a ball of socks and throw and catch them lying back in bed. I wouldn't think of that as particularly like, that sounds like great OT. But that might be exactly the kind of activity that a child who doesn't have a good sense of where their body is in the world and who is looking for stimulation might love that. My kid loves that. Anyway, talked a lot about this one, but I think it's worth checking out. And I would love to see like another version of it, or I don't know. I always want the book that's more relevant to my family. But I have put some time in on that one, and with that one, this is social bonding and nurture kinship, compatibility between cultures and biological approaches. This is a less practical application and more things you read. I love Robert Sapolsky's lectures, and this is a good book that I can't get through. This is one of the books that makes me feel like my brain power has diminished. Even though I can hear his voice in it as a lecturer, he's Harvard educated and lectures at Stanford, and shared his entire lecture series on human sexuality online. And I really enjoyed the biology and the psychology and all the things that go into his approach. And yet it's one of those books that is heavily footnoted, quite dense, and full of medical and anatomical words that make me feel stupid. My brain doesn't want to do it anymore. You can see my bookmark is only at the beginning of this book. These are Charles Dickens. You find free books, often things that people study in Spain as sort of the good books in English, are books people struggle through and don't really want to keep. So when I find things for cheap, I pick them up. Rudyard Kipling's Kim. It's a good one to talk about colonial mindset. And actually, it's kind of relevant to the Anne McCaffrey novels, too, because it's one of the books that she loved as a child. And the character Pimer in her books is based on Kim. And Kim is sort of, he's described sometimes as little friend to all the world. And he's basically kind of being trained to be a British spy. And he has heritage and language skills and is growing up in a place where all of that comes together. And so Pimer in the Pern series, which is, sci-fi. Some people say fantasy because it's dragons, but McCaffrey would say, nope, they're not sci-fi. They're not dragons, they're sci-fi. They're part of a breeding program. It's genetics. Anyway, I read Kim. Kim kind of fit into my reading journey at a time when I was reading a lot of John le Carré, and I like spy novels, and as also when I came across something where Anne McCaffrey was talking about Pimer and where he came from in the Pern books. Other things people get rid of that maybe I've read and don't remember, or maybe I'm going to get to later. House of Mirth, I feel like I've read it. Moby Dick, I feel like I've read it, but I used to read everything on the shelves that was considered the good books when I was 11 or 12. I'd read some books that I found quite disturbing, and I guided myself back to what it seemed like the adults agreed were the good books. I have Old Man and the Sea in my head, maybe Moby Dick, maybe not. I also have gone through periods in my life where I listen to audiobooks, and I feel like, in particular, the British side of kind of the classics where they're written in a dialect I can't read easily. Looking at you, Thomas Hardy. I tend to go audiobooks. But anyway, these are here if at some point the kids want to read them or have to read them. Some of these are truly random. And come from the book swap where somebody said, I'm getting rid of these. Does anybody want them? This is the book you wish your parents had read, and your children will be glad that you did. I like to think my relationship with my children is not so bad that I need this book, but it Helps with perspective taking. This, I don't know why it's here. Never Bite a Boy on the First Date. That goes somewhere else. Also a free book, Like a Mother, Feminist Journey Through the Science and Culture of Pregnancy. If Women Rose Rooted. This one is another feminist book that at the moment my brain is rejecting. I started it and I like it, but I don't know. I go through different phases. I have to be in the right mindset. This, I'm not sure why that's here. The Witch's Heart. That's The Boys in the Boat is not the one. I'm sorry. The Body in the Boat. I intended to order The Boys in the Boat, which is a story about a UW rowing team, University of Washington. This is spies, smugglers, and a brutal murder on the Kent coast. I have not read that, but I did not return it either. The Beasts of the Garden. Eric Larson is author of Devil in White City, which my grandmother loved. And stick those together just because. Dutiful Boy. A Memoir of a Gay Muslim's Journey to Acceptance. I have not read that, but when someone was giving it away, I was thinking, sure, why not? Kate Atkinson, Life After Life. A lot of these I haven't read that they were given to me, but some of them my kids have read. This one, Gift of the Gob, is Morsels of English Language History. I like these. Sometimes the vocabulary in them, though, is so distant from the actual English I speak that I think that's fun, but it certainly would be weird if my children started using this, kind of like the example I give of my son's liking to say that something is a right stonker based on hearing a sheep show judge say it. It doesn't make any sense where I'm from. Intimacies. So these are we love Nora Ephron and Zadie Smith, and I don't really have. It's not that I don't have time for it, but I feel like sometimes there are authors that make more sense to you in some phases of your life than others, and right now that's not what I need to be thinking about. This is somewhat useful. Eating and Drinking in Spain and Portugal. If you feel like you don't need to carry a whole giant dictionary around, you might just still want to know what it is that's on the plate. And then people give away dictionaries all the time, and I tend to snatch them up, even though I don't need them. This, you can see, it's a very abused edition of 501 Spanish verbs that I think must be mine from high school. It's been split and taped together and all of that. And I have kind of the same situation with either books that I've used in my courses for teaching or books that have been given away and someone said, do you want this? And I said, yes. So I don't know. Often people are getting rid of the Cambridge and Oxford courses, and those turn up, and sometimes I take those and think I'll use them later to make not tests. I don't really test my kids, but sometimes I look something over and think, oh, what's the part of that it wasn't top of mind for me, and then I make a point of teaching it to them. This one, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, I don't recommend. It's another, someone gave it to me. It adds some additional marking to talk about long and short sounds, and since we don't actually do that in English, I don't like it. I want my kids learn to decode without those markings. But you might come to it from a different place and might actually like that. It wasn't what I needed. Some random stuff picked up on geography. A lot of these, authentic assessment and teaching American English pronunciation and explaining English grammar and techniques in teaching writing, language and its structure. Those came from the teaching program that I did at Seattle Pacific University. And I probably should not have bothered to bring them here, but at the beginning of my life in Spain, I thought I was going to be a teacher more than a mother. Well, I knew I was going to be a mother, but I started out in this direction thinking that I would be teaching English. This is a parents' and teachers' guide to bilingualism. I find bilingualism to be a non-controversial topic in Spain, particularly in Catalonia, because most people are bilingual. There isn't this, need to give the hard sell about bilingualism. But that if you are actually your home language is a third language that is neither of those, then there are still conversations you need to have. But I feel like for monolingual families who are considering bilingualism or multilingualism, maybe it's more for them to say, like, this isn't going to slow your child's development, or they will have a different trajectory, but not a worse trajectory. And I don't think very many people who are multilingual already even are concerned or worry about that. This is Catalan and a book on spelling, and some of the books that I took from the consortium, which officially is how you can prove you're a good enough speaker for work in Spain. This one is mine from college. I should get that out again. English word building from Latin and Greek. That traveled with me. And I should do the Greek part with my kids because they won't get that naturally in Spain, probably. And this one is in the wrong place. Smart But Scattered is a book for, I think in particular, for parents of kids with ADHD. But in general, kids who have executive skills, kind of executive functioning delays or difficulties. I think it's a pretty good introduction to helping kids and the idea that there are things you can do and not simply say, your brain doesn't do that. Trying to think where that belongs. That probably belongs with the out of sync child. Has fun. So my point, I guess, was just to say that it isn't really easy to, where do I want my camera pointed, to help your family read in a home language if you don't have materials. There are amazing programs online. There are, classes you can take. There's a kind of, it's weird to describe it as like a chain or a branch, but there's a constellation of learning centers called Kids and Us, which I think is, as a trademark person, I think is a peculiar choice. But from what I've seen, kids who are coming to English and go to those kinds of courses kind of burn out on it. It's not as fun as it appears to be. Periodically, you'll have people out promoting it, handing out balloons, and you think, oh, these look like nice, fun, young people. But if you are the native-speaking parent at home, and if what you really want is hands-on books, your collection need not look at all like mine. But there's a couple dozen more probably in the kids' rooms that are... I know that along with how technology works, we have one that's about how food works. Lots of books are in use, which I like. But I would say that it's important to consider to help your learner get all the way to kind of an adult general knowledge base in English or your home language. You will want to consider not just what the world deems appropriate for little kids, but also a page at a time or a concept at a time from nonfiction books like these. And remembering that if it's miserable, you're not helping them. The best you can do is follow their interests and perhaps guide their interest maybe a little bit toward what is adjacent and more interesting to you or more educationally relevant. But if your kid wants to read the Minecraft Blockopedia and you've checked it out from the library in their other language a dozen times, then maybe that is a book you want to have in English in your house. And I hope your kids wear the covers off their science books like mine do, because I don't think science education is particularly strong in Spain and Catalonia, at least from what I've seen, which I will admit is a small sampling. There tends to be Science Week rather than an ongoing science curriculum. And while I am definitely a fan of sustainability and environmental approaches. If you think your kid might be headed towards something that requires hard science, you probably are going to want to put some of that in front of them sooner than they will get it here. I won't explain it well because I don't entirely understand it, but another thing to consider in Spain is that as kids head toward their teens, kind of the paths diverge into whether your kid is likely to be someone who goes on to university or whether they're likely to head toward more vocational programs. And that is usually kind of a choice they make, and sometimes based on how they perform at school, which path they end on. And that gives me anxiety. And the world is different from how I felt about it growing up, where I felt embarrassed anytime someone offered me something vocational, like I felt like they were putting me down. And when I was in high school, I took technical drawing, which is a good thing if someone thinks this one might be an architect. But I felt like, oh, why, that sounds kind of vocational to me, as if vocational were a bad word. And I want to get past sort of that elitist way of thinking. But I also know that it's kind of brutal if somebody decides at 14 whether you're going to be a mechanic or whether you're going to be a mechanical engineer. And I don't know what my kids will be sorted to, or what their desires are, what their expectations are. One of my kids talks pretty often about software development, and I get those kinds of books, making video games essentially, when I can find them in Spanish and Catalan. And they do some of the kind of early programming things with their dad that are popular. And my other kid, I really don't know. He's interested in economics because he likes money, and I don't argue with that. And I was interested in economics. I took micro and macroeconomics as part of my degree in the Jackson School of International Studies at the UW. But I can't quite picture. I mean, I can picture him being a history lecturer if no one else needed to get a turn to talk. And at one point I thought maybe he'll be a barber. He really loved hanging out at the barber shop, and it was one of his happier, more social spaces. He liked his barber. We used to go to a place called the Alhambra in the Clot neighborhood, and I was the mother of young boys, and even though that clearly, when you give it that name, kind of signals this is a male-only space, I just was myself and brought a book, and we got our hair cut by some nice barbers who probably didn't really want a woman in their barbershop. But I've come a long way in terms of thinking about or wondering about what will make people happy and how we measure success as adults. I think sort of the ambition is a desire for money and prestige and fame kind of view of things is a little bit bizarre now. And I'm trying to have for them and for myself a perspective on like a happy life, a balanced life, a life worth living that is not, I want my child to be a doctor. You could probably tell. I wouldn't mind getting an architect out of the deal. But it's not good for our kids to push them toward what we didn't do or can't have. I wanted to work. I wanted to work in the Foreign Service, and now I'm raising trilingual children who are dual heritage and have dual citizenship, and that's still probably not what they're going to choose. I'm going to try to make sure they're better qualified if they ever want to do that than I was by virtue of the education I got at home. But mainly, I just want to make sure that we launch and that they can be people in the world, and that I can have a period of my life where I'm just enjoying what they choose from afar, to the extent that you can do that as anybody's mother. There are a lot of books still in my husband's bedroom, which I think that we don't need to go through all of his. He has an enormous comic book collection. He has an enormous collection of fantasy novels and some science fiction and some history, like Ken Follett type reading. And his collection in English is better than mine ever was in the U.S. because I am at my heart a library person. But it's nice that we agree that having a house full of books is a good thing. He used to sell books as his part-time job at I believe it's the Sant Antoni market, which is the booksellers market in Barcelona. He spent weekends there and worked in a comic book shop in Santa Coloma while he was pursuing his chemistry degree. So it is one of the things that is awfully nice that if I make a wish list of books and have it ongoing forever, I don't order them all a bazillion at a time, but when it's time to order new books, he does not fight me on that a bit, and it makes for heavy moves when we choose new apartments. But holy cow, that's another 40 minutes of me talking about our home library. If you're listening, thanks for listening. And if you have ideas or recommendations, particularly on the nonfiction side, for what would improve this collection, I am not sure we're here for the duration. So, I don't know that I'm going to buy another Kallax full of books, but particularly anybody who's up to date on the US or English language kind of puberty books for boys, because that's not an area of expertise that I possess. And yeah, if you listen, thanks for listening. Goodbye from Sant Cugat.